Thank you for that introduction. I got totally humbled. And I'm really humbled to be here. When I look into the audience and I see all this young talent, I really think, yes, this is the right moment to be in Hong Kong. So thank you for the invitation. And it's also a pleasure to be here because it's a chance for me to come back and say hello to my good friend Ada Wong. So actually, the only reason why you are here is because I had to come and visit Ada Wong. So thank you for that help. But Ada asked me if I could come and share a few reflections concerning how have I developed my own leadership style, my own mindset. And I tried to look back when I was a young man at the same age as you, most of you. Could I just see how many of you is less than 20 years old? Could you please make a hand? Okay. So how many of you is between 20 and 25? Oh. So I'm happy. So I'll just reflect about where was I when I was between 20 and 25 years old. I had just graduated from the university. I was around 24 years old. And I'll tell you 3 small stories. And I hope that the time is not going to run out before I finish these 3 small stories. And each story consists of a kind of a leadership issue or reflection. And today, as I was introduced, I'm the minister for culture in Denmark and part of the Danish new government. And it's great to represent Denmark with this role. But 30 years ago, I was a young troublemaker like you. Today, I'm an old troublemaker. Around 30 years ago, I had just graduated from the university, and I had to find a job. At that time, there was a high unemployment among young people in Denmark. So I was really curious if I was able to find a job just after graduation. And I was looking in the newspapers, and I found an interesting ad where the city which I was living in was looking for a person who could work together with a group of troubled kids from the inner city. And I applied, and I was called in for the interview, and I tried to do my best. And 1 week later, I was informed that I actually had got the job, and I was so goddamn happy. So I said to the guy who interviewed me that I really wanted to thank him and say, oh, thank you because you hired me and you chose me out of all the people who applied for the job. And he looked at me and said, Uffe, you were the only one who applied. So I started my career applying for a job no one really wanted. And the reason why they didn't want it was that I had to really work with some troubled kids. They were kicked out of the local schools. No one wanted to be close to them. They made a lot of social conflicts in the local community. And then the city hired me to work together with these kids. There were around 20 of them. And they looked really tough, and they really made a lot of not very nice noise in the local community. So I had to figure out how can I do something together with them? How can I involve them in a meaningful project? At that time, maybe you can't believe it, but at that time I was quite fit. I was quite athletic. I loved circus acrobatics. I was able to climb 4 people high up in pyramids, etc., etc. And I looked at these kids. They were between 15 years old and up to 18, 19 years old. And they were quite tough, and they had a lot of energy, but they used the energy in the wrong direction. So I said, if I could use all this energy in a positive way, maybe I could change their mindset. So I said to them, and can you imagine, just have this picture in your head that there was these tough kids with black leather jackets. They were really like punks. And here I came as a young guy saying, hey, would you like to create a circus troupe together with me. And I don't know why, but I was able to persuade them. And actually they started to join the training for this acrobatic training. And actually it went very well, and after some months they were able to make human pyramids, etc., etc. So everything was actually a success. But there was one problem. And the problem had a name, and the name was Jimmy Larsen. It was the name of one of the guys. The reason he was a problem in this context was that he was really, really big. He was around 100 kilo fat. He looked totally like a big loser. And of course he couldn't climb up in these pyramids. He couldn't really do his somersaults because he was too big. And I said to myself, why on earth should I work together with this kid? And I said, I had to find a positive role for him. And I said, okay, you could put up all the light equipment, you could create the right stage scenography, etc. And the Jimmy, he put up the lights and then put all the stuff on stage. And then he walked out on the edge of the show and looked into what was happening on the stage. And all the rest of the young kids did all the performances. And Jimmy was standing here on the sideline. And of course, it was not the right way to do it. So luckily, I got a good colleague. And he was able to create a relationship with Jimmy. And after some weeks, Jimmy and my new colleague Søren came up to me, and Jimmy said to me, we have developed an act into the show, and we would really like to see it as a part of the performance. And I looked at them, and I couldn't imagine that Jimmy was able to come up with any positive acts into the show. But I said, I accepted that the next time we rehearsed, Jimmy should come and show his act. And what you should try to imagine now is that here there's a big red back curtain. And the show should take place in front of the red back curtain. And beside the back curtain, all of us were standing, or the people who should be part of the show. I was sitting here in the audience looking up to figure out, could this act actually work? And what you should imagine was that from the backstage into the stage, front stage, came out of the red curtain, stepped in a young guy, very tiny, skinny, with a big rope over his shoulder. And then he walked all the way to the edge of the stage with his rope. And when the rope was totally stretched out, there was a huge cry behind the red curtain. And I won't make the cry, so don't relax. But still, a huge cry, and in entered Jimmy. And the guy who had to present Jimmy said, may I present Jimmy Larsen, the wild animal from blah, 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 raised on French fries and French porn, blah, 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 blah. It was really black humor. And all the audience totally lost their jaw. Because one thing was that Jimmy came in with a big, big shout. What he has created, he had made a costume. And the costume was some very small, tight trousers. And there was a leopard pattern on the trousers. And can you imagine Jimmy coming in on the stage with a huge shout and with these small, very small trousers? And he was really big. So we got a total shock. And I said to Jimmy, I can't present you this way. We can't do it. And of course he should do all kind of interesting circus acts as well, but I can't present you like this. I can't do it. But Jimmy and Søren persuaded me and said, Uffe, test it in front of an audience. And then if it doesn't work, we'll skip it. 2 weeks later, we had to make a public show, and everything went well. The first of the show, all the gymnastics came on stage, did the human pyramids, etc., etc. And then it was the time for Jimmy to enter the stage. And still, remember the red curtain. And in came this little skinny guy with a big rope, straightened it out, and then there was a huge cry, and Jimmy came in, and every one of us was standing behind the curtain, so we couldn't see the audience. We could only feel the energy in the room. And Jimmy came in, "Wow!" And the presenter said, "May I present Jimmy Larsen, the wild animal from blah, 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 blah." And there was, whew, you could feel the shock. And then the show went on, and Jimmy came back again to the backstage, and it went maybe 1, 2, 3 seconds, and then all the applause came down from the ceiling. And the rest of the circus actors looked at Jimmy and said, "Why? You are a loser. But you got all the applause." There was no one before or after Jimmy. Jimmy became the star of the show. And we looked at Jimmy and said, "What has happened?" And what had happened was that Jimmy, everyone knew that when they looked at Jimmy, he looked like a loser. And then Jimmy has totally changed the mindset and said, "Okay, if you think I'm a loser, I'll show you I'm a big loser." So he totally changed the mindset 180 degrees. And what also he was so brave, because every one of us have our own handicaps, where we think we're not bright enough, we're not beautiful enough, we're not smart enough, we are talking not the right language, etc., etc. We have all our certain handicaps, either visible or invisible. Jimmy has been so brave that he showed all his vulnerability in front of the audience. And he was actually a very, very fun guy. So he actually opened up the hearts from the first row and all the way to the back end of the audience. And he became the star of the show. So from Jimmy, I learned something about when I'm meeting challenges in my life, I ask myself, what would Jimmy have done? And then I'll change my mindset 180 degrees. That is one thing I learned from him. The second thing I learned from him was to understand that in the challenge, there's actually a gift. So if you sometimes are meeting challenges, try to figure out what is actually the gift inside the problem. So that was the first story. The second story took place a few years later, because this young group of teenagers became a really local success. And they created wonderful shows up through the 80s. And out of this group of kids grew other groups of kids. After 4 or 5 years, it was actually a totally network of cultural activists. So in 88, we created a cultural organization called the Frontrunners. And what you should imagine was a certain MaD in 88. I was sitting at our little office, and together with me there was 2 other young men, and we were sitting around the table, and in the corner there was a coffee machine brewing good morning coffee. And suddenly there was a knock on the door. And us 3 young men said, "Please come in." And the door opened, and in entered a very young and beautiful woman. I think she was around 23 years old. How many 23 years old women are there in the audience? Please raise the hands. Oh, that's a couple. So you can imagine, this woman was on your age, and she came in and she said, with a bright, sharp accent, she said, "Hey guys, do you want to play?" And we were sitting there, "What?" And she said, "Yes, do you want to? I have an offer for you guys." And of course, we wanted to hear her story. So, and she was a very, very good communicator. She actually had this cliffhanger communication, because she said, "We are a group of young kids, young people in Copenhagen, the capital of Denmark. We are around 10 people, 10, 15 people, and we have got this very, very simple idea." And then she made a pause, and we were sitting there, 3 young guys saying, "Hey, come on, tell us more." And she said, we have this very simple, very straightforward idea which we would really like to see happening next year. That would be the fall of '89. And we said, yes, what is it? And she said, calm down. It's a very simple, very concrete idea. And we are around 10, 15 young people in Copenhagen, and we think it's possible. And we said, yes, but what is it? What is it all about? And she looked at us and she said, yes, we got this idea that we want to, and then this long pause, and said, invade Soviet Union. And we said, what are you going to do? You still have to remember, 88, there was an Iron Curtain through Europe. There was West Europe, there was East Europe. In the Soviet Union, there was still a communist society. There was the Berlin Wall in Berlin. And here this young woman, 23 years old, standing in our little office, saying, okay, we are 10, 15 people in Copenhagen and we want to invade Soviet Union. And the first question we asked her was, has anyone accepted this? And she looked at, of course not. No one had accepted this in Moscow. And then the second question was, do you have the money for it? Of course not. Their idea was that in the fall of '89, 2,000 young people from Scandinavia, that would mean the double amount of young people as in this auditorium, should cross the border of Soviet Union from two places, from Finland and from Poland, and then they should move all together towards Moscow. When we reached Moscow in around October, the 1st of October '89, we should organize a huge rock concert on the Red Square in front of Kremlin. Does this sound interesting or what? Yeah, could you imagine it? If I gave you a challenge right now and created a project and you had 1 year to organize this, these kids in Copenhagen that didn't have the money, that didn't have the allowance from the leadership in Moscow, but they had a dream. They had a dream towards changing the society, and they had a purpose, and they had a strategy. The strategy was to make cultural dialogues with the ordinary Russian people, and through that maybe be part of the change in the at that time Soviet culture. So we just had to say yes. Of course we wanted to be part of that project. So for the next 1.5 years, we worked day and night to see this happen. In September '89, we started 2 cultural caravans. One went up through Sweden into Finland and headed towards Moscow. One went through Germany all the way to Poland and up to Moscow. And we met each other in the mid-September, late September of '89. We did the big rock concert in Moscow. And what happened was that I was standing on the Red Square around the 30th of October '89. And we have been the first Westerner who was allowed to travel freely in the Soviet Union at that time. We were the first Westerner, European Westerner, who was allowed to stay at people's private homes. And we have talked with all the ordinary Soviet Union citizens about their hopes and dreams for change. So I was standing on the Red Square the 3rd of October '89, and there was a group of journalists who came up to me and asked me, Uffe, now you have been inside Soviet Union for more than a month. You have been have all the dialogues with the ordinary citizens of Soviet Union. When do you think there will be change in Soviet Union? I looked into the camera and I said, something is changing, because Gorbachev was a rising political star. He talked about glasnost and perestroika. Something was changing because we were allowed to do the project. Something was changing. But I looked into the camera and I said, I think maybe it will still take maybe 10, 15, 20 years before anything will happen. What happened 1 month later? The Berlin Wall came down. And that really, really learned me something about that change can happen overnight. Change can happen overnight if there is a critical mass of innovation, creativity, hunger for change. And what we see right now in our part of the world, around Middle East, we had the Arabian Spring. Young people no one could have imagined that thousands and thousands of young people will join each other in Cairo, in Egypt, and start a new transformation of the Arab world. No one could have imagined that 3 months before. So change can happen, and it can happen soon. But it requires a lot of you young, talented people, which is, for example, here in this room tonight, that you want to take your part in the change. So that was the second little story. Would it be possible to tell one more? Maybe I'm running out of time. But of course, one thing is Jimmy, about changing the mindset 180 degrees. One thing is about finding the gift in the problem. One thing is that change can happen overnight. But everyone are doing mistakes through our lifetime, again and again. And the last story I will tell happened in San Francisco years after. Because when we came home from Moscow, we asked ourselves, my team, what kind of education should we have had to do what we were doing? Because at the university, I was never trained to make contracts with the KGB. Nope. At the university, I was never trained to make conflict solving with the Russian mob. No. At the university, I was never trained to organize a rock concert in Moscow. No. So I said, what kind of education should I have had to do what I was doing? And out of that simple question, we created the Kaospilots program, which is still going after 20 years. It has its jubilee just a few months ago. So the Kaospilots started in 91. And in 96, we created our first outpost in San Francisco, where we were sending our students to San Francisco for a whole year. To send a lot of young students, times is up, it says here on the screen, was to actually to fundraise a lot of money. And I was under pressure. But luckily, I was able to organize a sponsor meeting in San Francisco in November 96. And I took on my best dress, and it was actually one of the major banks in San Francisco. And I went into the elevator, I went up on the third floor to have the meeting with the CEO of this specific bank. And when I came into the reception, the PA of the CEO looked at me and looked up at my clothes, and I could very, very clearly look in her eyes that I didn't fit into her imagination of a guy who's going to meet her boss. So I entered the office of the CEO, and as soon as I came in, I could really feel that this meeting will never work out. So when I entered the table for the discussion, the only thing I was thinking about was how could I come out of the room. And I was under a bit pressure because I had to make this deal, so I was speed speaking. The more I felt nervous, the more I speak, and the whole meeting was a catastrophe. It was a failure. So I had to back out and say thank you for the meeting. He was a very polite guy, but everything went wrong. Everything went wrong in that meeting. And I had to go back to my team and just tell them this really didn't work out. Luckily, there was one very nice old American guy in the room of the office. And he came up to me and he said to me, Uffe, I can really see at you that you don't feel well. And he looked me into the eyes, and then he gave me maybe the best advice I have ever got by anyone. Because he said to me, Uffe, it's okay to make failures under 4 circumstances. It's okay to make failures under 4 circumstances. The first one is that you are able to identify your failure. Second is that you will take responsibility for the part of the failure which is yours. Third, that you will learn from your failure. Fourth, that you will do it differently the next time you are in the same situation. So he gave me this very, very important advice. Identify your failure, take responsibility, learn from it, and do it differently the next time. So for me, I know that I'll make failures. For example, right now I haven't followed the timeline. So I have to be more sharp next time. But these 3 small stories is example of that on our life journey we'll meet people who will learn and teach us and who will shape our minds. And now you will have 3 days together. Please learn from each other. Please listen to the others' experiences. Please pick their brains, steal the good ideas in a good manner. Please be part of the change. So, Jimmy, what did he learn me? 108-degree change. Find the gift in the problem. The Moscow story, change can happen overnight. If you do failures, identify it, take responsibility, learn from it, and do it different the next time. So this was my little reflection to you guys, and I hope that you will just shake the world because we need you.